Hi, everybody in forensic psychology. Psychology 267. Can I be honest with you? This next chapter is something I know a great deal about, but I do not like as an occupation for me. I've actually done this. I had a job working for our court as a child custody evaluator and a mediator. We will get into that. And it just isn't for me. Maybe other people, but it's not the kind of thing I want to do for a living anymore. In fact, if you ever go into this, I would recommend that you keep a bottle of Advil or something like that in your desk because you'll get a headache more days than not. Child custody cases. Isn't it fun to do what's in the best interest of children? Absolutely. But it's the parents or guardians or grandparents or whomever that cause the most trouble, not the children themselves. Child custody cases. So let's get started. This is a lot more pages than the other sections that we've covered in this reading packet thus far, but you don't need to know every word of it. I will tell you what I do want you to know. So first of all, it can be very stressful. People going through the court system and the judge orders the people who are splitting up, whether they were married or not, is irrelevant. So what matters is they're going their separate ways and they need someone to intervene and say who's getting custody of the kids. Now look at this statistic here from 2003. Who knows if it's still accurate or not. Only 15% of people actually need the court to intervene. The other 85%, they can split up and go their separate ways and let the kids still have their mom and their dad. But those 15%, let me tell you, they can be difficult. I've heard of psychologists even getting death threats from the person that they're like not on that person's side, if you know what I mean. They go to court and say, oh, I think the dad should have primary custody, and then the mom threatens that person's life for testifying. My goodness, it can be nasty. So, we used to call it custody and visitation. Visitation makes it sound like you're visiting somebody in jail. They've kind of changed that word to child access or other things that don't make it sound like you're visiting the person who's like locked up somewhere. So the psychologist has to determine, this is going to come up a lot in this chapter, the best interest. That's what it's called. What's in the best interest of the children? So many factors go into this. That's the next section here. The parents are evaluated with psychological tests and interviews. The psychologist has to have a reason for saying what he or she thinks is best. And you might want to watch the child interact with the parents, see who knows more about the kids and what their needs are and what their preferences are. There's been plenty of movies and TV shows about this, by the way. So, parental responsibilities. So far, who's the one who takes the kids to the doctor and, is involved in their schooling and things like that? You might think it's, who has the most money to support the kids? But really, it's a lot more than that. That's a minor factor compared with who would be the best to have the kids in his or her care. The best interests. School adjustment, if one parent is moving out of town or out of state, that's disruptive to the kids, obviously. Is the other one more stable? The other parent? Does one parent have more time, more understanding, more patience? Extended family? Does anybody have grandparents in the neighborhood? Things like that. Is one parent leaving the other one for another person? You met another woman or another man? That should be a factor too. Not that you're not allowed to do that, but just how disruptive is it going to be for the children? So that is what the forensic psychologist, you have to have a reason, like I said, for telling the court in your report what you are recommending. Now, the Michigan Custody Act, yes, we don't live in Michigan if this class is being taught in Arizona, probably. Most of you live here. However, this was adopted by many states, including Arizona, as a framework, of how to decide these things. So don't think for the exam that you need to know all these factors. There's way too many. This was discovered in Michigan to be the best thing, and it's true for other states too. I mean, just look at some of these for a minute. Which parent is showing more love and affection and emotional ties? Involved in the child's life, knowing what food they like and what they're allergic to, and clothing and medical care. Has the child lived in a stable environment? The moral fitness of the parents. Are they good people or not? The mental and physical health of the parents. There's just so many things that are looked at. Look at K, domestic violence. Oh, look at J also. Do you realize that the kids still need the other parent? You might be divorcing that person. It doesn't mean the kids should necessarily be thinking that way too. So there's a lot of verbiage here, I guess I would say, going into the specifics of how you would look at all of these factors. That will not be on the test. Know the Michigan Act, but don't think that you have to memorize all of this stuff. So here is what you want to know in particular. You ready? First of all, it might seem simple. A parent does not have custody, or they do have custody. Not really. There's some complicated things here. Not complicated for you to understand. I mean complicated of how it will make your life if you split up from the other parent. So first of all, physical custody and legal custody. Those are two separate things. They could be the same for a family, or they could be different for a particular family once they split up. Physical custody. Where will the children live? Are they going to live with one parent, with the other parent, or maybe kind of 50-50 where you'll split it as much as possible? When I used to do this line of work, people would fight and argue about everything. And one of them was, well, Gilbert schools or Chandler schools or Casa Grande schools, they try to argue which school district is better. And then some people would argue, well, they're not going to go to school enough days in your district. You know what? Nearly every school district has 180 school days, assuming it's non-COVID, and it's just a regular school year type of thing. That might be split up differently. It might be on the quarter system or the modified year-round or the traditional school year, but still, how many days are in a year? 365. So are you seeing where I'm going with this? It is possible that the kids could live with one parent on school nights and the other parent on non-school nights. Wouldn't that be pretty close to equal? Do the math. 180 out of 365 days? Well, that only works if the two parents live close to each other. What if you live in different states? That's going to be very difficult, don't you think? So, the physical custody, where do the kids live? Years ago, it was always assumed the kids would live with mom unless something was terribly wrong with mom, and dad would get every other weekend plus a few hours on Wednesdays. That's not typical as much as it used to be a generation or two ago. Now, if parents can find a way to split it up more equally, well, great. So how about that example that I just gave? School night versus non-school night. Wouldn't that be almost exactly equal? Well, wait a minute. What if I have the kids on school nights and my ex has them on non-school nights, but I want the kids to go on a summer vacation with me? That wouldn't be allowed, would it? Because I don't have the non-school nights. Do you see how people need to compromise and work together? Now, there's a joke in this line of work that if they could get along so well, they wouldn't need to split up in the first place, would they? Well, they go their separate ways for whatever reason, they can still do what's in the best interest of the kids. Now, here's another thing to think about. What about holidays? Who's going to get Christmas? Who's going to get Thanksgiving? You've got to find a way to split up the holidays and the birthdays and everything else. It gets so complicated. It really does. So, The person who does not have physical custody, if you're not splitting it up equally, we call this visitation, or now better known as access. There's other words to it, so it doesn't sound like it's a jail or prison situation, like you get visitation. So, joint physical custody, we just talked about that, didn't we? That the kids could live equally or almost equally with both parents. So, true story about me. One time I'm out jogging and this person stops me, this middle-aged man, when I was younger, and he goes, "Do you live there?" I'm like, "Yeah, that's my house." And he goes, "Any chance you want to sell it?" And I'm like, "No, not really." And he goes, "Oh, because I'm a realtor and I sold a house to one person and the ex-husband wants to live as close to his ex-wife as possible." And I said, "Really? If I divorced my wife, I'd want to live as far away as possible." I'm joking. I could tell what he was talking about, that they wanted the kids to be able to go back and forth. And yeah, even if you stayed at my house till after dinner, you could go to the other person's house. That sounds like they were really able to work together, even though they split up with each other. That doesn't happen often. Like I told you, my job was stressful because I found that people really just like wanted to argue with each other nonstop. So, find a way to split up the physical custody, if possible, equally. What if one person works out of town? That's not going to work too well, is it? What if one person just isn't a good parent and can't raise the kids? That's not going to work either. So you need to have the physical custody situated. And if it can be joint where you're splitting it equally, great, especially if you live close to each other. Legal custody, that's a different story. Who's making legal decisions for the kid? The mom, the dad, a grandparent, a guardian, someone else? There's big decisions that need to be made. If we were in class together, I would be asking you for examples when you were growing up. Was it braces or a surgery, like getting your wisdom teeth out? Or was it something like a sleepover? That's a legal decision, believe it or not. Or something like, can your picture appear in the school yearbook? I mean, there's things that come up all the time that parents need to make legal decisions. So who is doing that? Joint legal custody means you need to agree on it. Now, what if, oh, by the way, that doesn't always happen, but it often does, where the judge says, yes, you have to agree on legal decisions from little ones to big ones. Surgery would be a big one. Getting your picture, online for the school's website would be a little one. Parents would need to agree. What if one parent is really troubled for one reason or another? You have a legal history, of like DUIs or something like that, or drug abuse or whatever. The judge might order supervised visitation. A supervisor gets paid, and it's just a community member. It's not somebody with a lot of training usually, believe it or not. You might make $20 an hour even as a college student to supervise one parent interacting with their children, and you have to report back anything that goes wrong. So maybe that person has DUIs or, something else like that. That's kind of common, a history of drug or alcohol problems. We don't want the kids to be denied a mom or a dad in their lives, but it might have to be supervised. So you might meet that parent at McDonald's or at the library or a bookstore or a park or something, and let them interact with their kids in a supervised way. I've seen that happen a lot, where the judge will order that so the kid still has both parents, but it might have to be that way if there's a real cause for concern. Mediation. I used to have a job doing this. It was the first job I had with my PhD. And again, just like the custody evaluations, it wasn't fun. Why? Because you get these people court ordered to you. Rarely are they there voluntarily. It's usually court ordered. And The judge wants you to help them come up with one of those agreements. As soon as you finally get them to agree to one thing, then something comes up like, well, what about Lexi's birthday? Oh, no, I'm not compromising on that. Oh, my goodness, here we go. We're starting all over again, aren't we? It feels like sometimes you take one step forward and two steps back with people like this because there's always something they need to argue about. Well, mediation is supposed to be a safe place where they can work out their differences. And the mediator is non-biased. You're not taking the mom's side. You're not taking the dad's side. You're supposed to be neutral. Right there, neutral. What you hope to come up with is a joint stipulation where both parents would sign that they agree to everything that you talked about. Now, let me tell you something. If you've never hired an attorney with your own money, I'm happy for you because it's very expensive. If you're getting divorced or just separating and you're paying this attorney $300 or more an hour, quite often, that can get very expensive. If you can go to mediation and agree to something that you can live with and that you think is in, what's the words? The best interest of the children, that would be the best thing for everybody, and it would save you a ton of money, wouldn't it? So, you don't want anybody to sign a joint stipulation if they feel like they're being pressured or threatened, but if they really do agree, it becomes a legally binding court contract. It really does. And can the person bring that to their attorney and say, hey, instead of paying you for like hundreds of hours of work, can you just read this and tell me if it sounds right? That might be a much cheaper way to go than dragging your attorney through everything you're doing, don't you think? Last thing here, family court advisors used to be known as special masters, but I think we all agreed in Arizona, who were part of the court system, that that was a ridiculous term, special master. Family court advisor. You get to be sort of like a mini judge. What do I mean by that? Well, you are not the mediator or the evaluator, but as a psychologist, the judge might appoint you to hear little things. You'd be surprised how sometimes people will call their lawyer and say, the kids just came home from their moms and she let them have soda. Oh my goodness, I think the judge is going to put on her robe and rush right to the courthouse and, bang the gavel. I'm being sarcastic. That is not considered a life or death issue in court, but people feel like it is. You let them stay up too late. Oh, yeah. Well, you let them have chewing gum. The judge doesn't care about things like that. So the little things would go often through a family court advisor. And then the family court advisor sends the recommendation to the judge and says, okay, both parents are required to serve the children vegetables. We're done with it. The little things. And I'm exaggerating a little, but not too much. Sometimes people will argue over the smallest thing. What should you know about it other than what I've told you? 36 months. That's how long the family court advisor is part of your life, basically. And if you don't like that family court advisor, psychologist usually, you can tell the judge you want a new one, but they might not agree with you. They might say, sorry, you're stuck with it for 3 years, 36 months. So the scope of it, the family court advisor makes specific recommendations to the court about parenting issues, holiday schedules. Oh my goodness, you're going to argue now over, I don't know, Labor Day or some other 4th of July because you're having a big party in your backyard and the other parent says, no way, that's my Saturday. You get to decide these little things. And by the way, they are often about schedule things. You think it's your weekend. I think it's my weekend. People will argue over the littlest things. Like I told you, I respect people who do this for a living, but it just was not for me. Being around arguing people all the time, all day long, no thanks. So that is what you need to know for this chapter about child custody and related issues. Keep up with the Douglas book and everything else, and that's it for now. Take care.